Hey everyone, it's Morgan and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll be going over how to draw a rose with Prismacolor pencils. Or any brand of colored pencil. Prismacolor is just the one that I used in this video, but these techniques and methods can be applied to any kind of colored pencils, so don't worry if this isn't the brand you have, anything will work. So to start out the drawing, I sketch out all the petals on the flower and the stem. I do this using a 3H pencil, since the lead is much harder than your typical pencil, so it comes out on the page a lot lighter. The reason that I want to use a lighter pencil is because if I make too dark of lines that can't be erased very well, then the pencil lines will still show up in the final drawing. You can't layer colored pencil directly over dark graphite, since the graphite is just much darker and it will show through no matter what, especially since this drawing is going to be done with very light colors. Keeping that in mind, once you're done with the sketch, you need to clean it up a little bit if you sketch like me and it's kind of messy. But if you sketch perfectly, then are you really sketching at all? Anyway, right before you switch to color, I use the Mono Zero eraser and I clean up around the edges just so that there's one solid line instead of a bunch of hairy, jagged lines, because these hairy, jagged lines will mess up the colors later on, and it's more chance of the graphite showing through. So I clean it up with an eraser. And for any places that are just too light, I'll go over it lightly with an HB pencil. And I use this HB just because it's in my lead pencil, and obviously lead pencils are much better with precision than a regular wooden pencil. So using the sharp point of the lead pencil, I go over the lines in one single line so that everything is as thin as it can be. And then right before I add color, I go over the whole thing with my kneaded eraser to lighten up the entire sketch. I try to make it as light as possible so that I can still see it and know where to color, but so that there's the tiniest amount of graphite possible on the page. So, now that that's taken care of, we switch to color. The way I color is that I lay down my lightest colors first, so that I don't accidentally lose the highlighted areas while I'm using darker colors, and then I build my way up to darker layers. Colored pencils are so important to work with in layers. So my lightest layer is going to be my first layer, and I just keep layering on until I get to my darker colors. And I make sure to keep blending in between each layer to make sure that they all blend together nicely. So on that topic, let's talk about blending real quick. As you may or may not have noticed, I use a colorless blender pencil all the time. And as I've stated in some of my other videos, there is some controversy about the colorless blender pencil, but I love it and I think it helps me so much. So in between each of my layers, my lighter to darker layers, I always use the Colorless blender pencil in between. This just makes sure that all the layers are flat and it pushes the color together so that you can watch the blending happen. I love watching time-lapse videos with colorless pencil blenders because you can seriously see within a second blended versus unblended. It's beautiful. So for this drawing, I tackled the whole thing in sections. Each petal I consider a different section, and in each section of the drawing, I'll follow the same method over and over again. I'll lay down the lightest color, which is white, and then the second two lightest colors, and then I'll blend them together and then move on to the darker and blend and dark and blend until I like the way it looks. My darkest color in this drawing was Process Red, and don't worry about colors, I'll leave them all in the description below under materials. So I would work my way up to using Process Red and then use the Colorless blender to blend everything out together. And I would use this Process Red to distinguish between the petals of the drawing, because once you layer down the same couple colors for each section, they all kind of look the same. Instead of leaving the graphite lines there to distinguish between them, I would sharpen the Process Red as sharp as I can get it and use the thinnest line possible to go around each petal. This way, it's outlined in a color that's present in the drawing instead of a little bit of graphite showing through. For this drawing, I'd say that the Process Red was the most important color throughout the drawing. It was the darkest shadow, and it was also, like I said, what distinguished between the petals. And it was a very bright and vibrant color, so it was kind of the one that you see first, right next to the white. And then the contrast between the lightest white and the Process Red just kind of tied the whole thing together. I really enjoyed using this color, especially because it's not one that I use very often. I'm not one to use pink that often at all, and I liked it a lot. Although I will say, I love the way that white comes out on toned tan paper. That's the main reason that I use this colored paper. For anyone that doesn't know, tone tan paper is exactly what it sounds like. It's paper that is tan. And the point of it is for colors like white and lighter shades to really pop out against the paper. Because obviously a white colored pencil wouldn't really do anything on white paper. But on the tone tan paper, ooh, you can see how much it pops out, and I love it so much. In some of my previous videos, I've used tone gray a lot, and this is my first time using tone tan because it's a new sketchbook. But there's really no difference between the two. It's just gray versus tan. It has the same effect with the colored pencils, and everything feels just the same on both pages. For anyone that has no experience with tone tan or tone gray, I highly, highly, highly recommend purchasing a sketchbook of one of these. I love them so much. I use these sketchbooks for almost every drawing that I do in color because I am just in love with the way that color shows up on it. Unless I'm using Copic marker, I'm pretty much always in these sketchbooks. And they weren't that expensive, it wasn't a huge investment, like I have nothing bad to say about these. So, anyone that's wondering, get it. I ordered mine on Amazon. They're super easy to find, really not that expensive. Get it. Alright, back to the drawing. For the greens, I did the exact same thing that I did with the pinks. Probably should explain that a little bit earlier, but it's the same method. I used the lightest green first, and then slowly built up using the darker greens and blended them together with the blending pencil. It might not seem like it at first, but this was actually a very simple drawing. The only time-consuming part was all the blending layers in between, but that's the way it is with every colored pencil drawing. Colored pencils are a huge time investment, but we all tackle it just because we like the way the product looks. And, I mean, that's the price to pay. You want something pretty? You gotta put some time and effort into it. And I have no problem with that. So, the reason that I think this is so easy is just because, like I've been saying a lot recently, I've been using the same method for every section. It just comes out the same. Even though each little section looks slightly different, it's just because I used a varying amount of shadows versus the white. And that's just because of the light source in the drawing. But seriously, every section, all I did was white, and then the light pink, then the darker pinks, and then blend. It doesn't look simple, but I swear it is. Once you break down all the steps, you pick up on it pretty easily, and then all you do is repeat the same steps a billion times until you're finished. Colored pencils can be kind of scary, but I promise you that once you get used to it, they're no big deal at all. My first time using my colored pencils, I was really intimidated, and I would look at these drawings and I'd just wonder how in the world they were possible. But once you break down all the steps and you get used to it, it's no big deal. Once I was finished with all the pinks and the greens, I wanted to stress some of the shadows a little bit more, so I used a black colored pencil. And the only thing I have to say about this is that make sure you're careful with it, because even though it's a pencil, black will always be a very powerful color, and you gotta be careful with how much you're putting down, especially since you can tell that this is a very light, pretty picture, that black is very powerful and can kind of corrupt the entire thing. Now that I got that out of the way, don't be too intimidated. Just make sure that you keep a very light hand and only put black in tiny, increments at a time. If you need more, you can add more, but if you add too much, you can't really get rid of it. So just be careful and get used to it, I guess. I use the most black right on top of the stem, because that's where the most shadow in the entire drawing is. But then I also use a little bit of black around the petal areas, in the parts that I want to just stress a little bit more shading. Just this tiny bit of black separates the sections even better than just the process red, like we were talking about before. And it just gives, darker shadow to it so that you can see even more contrast between the lights and the darks. And it really just ties in the whole drawing together. I consider the black as one of the finishing touches since it's the last color that I really pick up. But then my real finishing touches are with white because those are the little details that don't make a huge difference, but just little things I like to add in at the end. Like as soon as I'm done with the drawing, I'll use the white and I'll go over all the highlights just one last time, just in case anything got a little bit messed up throughout the finishing process. And just like a little pop at the end. And even though I always say that you should map out your highlights in the beginning, meaning the first color I usually pick up is white, if you miss a little spot here or there, it's not the end of the world. At the end of my drawing, speaking about the final touches, I used the white pencil to go over some areas that I wanted to be brighter. Because white is one of the only colored pencils that you can layer on top of another color and kind of like brush the color away. Meaning, if you take the white color pencil and burnish over another area, burnishing meaning pressing down extremely hard with your pencil, then you can get some of the white to layer down and kind of shoo away some of the pink. I also did this down on the right side of the stem, just because I thought the stem needed a little extra something. So I added some white on the right side by burnishing over the entire thing. Since the whole thing was covered in green already, the side that I wanted white on, all I did was just burnish straight over it. And you can see that it did make quite a bit of a difference, even though there was already color there previously. Similar to how the black color pencil is very strong, the white one is powerful too, although much easier to fix mistakes using a white colored pencil. Black is powerful, but white stands out a lot. And it's powerful in a similar way, by being a dominating color. Although, unfortunately, it only really works this way on toned paper. If you're using white paper, the only thing a white color pencil is good for is blending. So if you don't own a colorless blender pencil, you can just use white. It works the same way, except it's going to make your drawing look a little bit more kind of milky, like it's saturated with white, but it'll give you the same blending effects, just a bit of a white tone on top. And hey, if that's what you want, it's worth the sacrifice. So anyway, thank you guys all so much for watching this video, and let me know if you learned anything in the comments below. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.